The World Trade Organization says global trade is expected to grow at a much slower pace this year than previously thought. WTO analysts have lowered their growth forecast for 2019 to only 2.6% from 3.7%. The World Trade Organization's General Secretary Roberto Azevedo said this should come as no surprise to anyone. In 2017, global trade in goods and services rose by 4.6%, but ongoing conflicts and trade spats cut that rate to 3% in 2018. And the trend is continuing with an even lower number expected this year. However, the WTO expects a return to over 3% growth in 2020 if a disorderly Brexit can be averted and the trade conflict between the US and China gets resolved. Recent talks between Washington and Beijing raised some hopes that no further punitive tariffs between the two will be implemented and existing ones loosened. But that is by no means a sure thing. The US has recently threatened China with more tariffs in the case of no agreement.
I'm now joined by the chief economist of the World Trade Organization, Robert Koopman. Mr. Koopman, thanks for joining us on DW Business. What is actually worse, Brexit or the trade spat between China and the US at the moment?
Well, they're both bad, but I would have to say that the global nature, the global impact of U.S.-China and U.S. actions on other countries is probably going to have a much bigger impact than Brexit, although Brexit will have a very concentrated impact on the U.K. and the EU. So, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, probably a little bit worse on the global side, U.S.-China.
In concrete terms, what are your findings? What can we expect?
Well, our findings are, by the way, generally our concern is slowing economic growth because that drives a lot of trade growth, particularly investment. But these trade measures that countries are taking against one another, U.S.-China, for example, or the uncertainty around the Brexit deal also weigh on trade growth, and that can affect quite a bit the bilateral relationships between countries. We see a lot of trade diversion potentially occurring, particularly in Asia and North America, and we would expect with a disorderly Brexit to see more trade diversion occurring around the EU and the UK. So what that means is that the direct effects are offset partially by trading with other countries instead of bilaterally between those two regions. But then, if that affects firms and consumers' decisions about what to build or buy, then you start to get pretty significant negative effects on economic growth, and you get significant negative effects on trade.
You were talking about that trade finds other routes. Are there winners in this situation?
Well, overall, I'd say no. There are no net winners because of the expected impact on global GDP. This trade conflict, these trade tensions will weigh on global GDP. In some sectors, in some countries, there's going to be this trade diversion and moving trade around, and some countries will win and some countries will lose in those particular sectors. But the overall weighing down of global economic growth, which has very important impact on global trade, is likely to result in a net loss for the global economy.
If we look at world trade at the moment and global politics, increasingly politicians seem to be concerned about their national interest only. And WTO is all about international cooperation. Is the era of international cooperation over, maybe?
Well, it's certainly under stress right now. I think it's way too early to say that it's over. I think, if we continue to see this kind of economic slowdown and the kind of disruptions that are occurring as a result of these trade conflicts continue, I suspect you'll start to see countries starting to look to cooperate again. And maybe we can use this kind of crisis to strengthen global cooperation.
Let's hope it's just a phase. Robert Koopman there, Chief Economist of the World Trade Organization in Geneva. Thank you very much for joining us.